Now, what's the name of this game?
Beta!
Earth. But I already told you it's not.
Beta!
To tell you the truth, honestly, it's probably pretty
amazing.
So let's check out this
Beta!
Earth. And in the immortal words of Jesse Lee Peterson, I'm sure it's going to be
amazing.
Udric Boquegs, aka the review on YouTube's game, BetaEarth. He's been reviewing and doing how to plays on all the dead CCGs for over 6 years now. Go check him out on YouTube, the review, and type in any old card game or BetaEarth and he will surely pop up. All right, so today we're gonna go over BetaEarth, check out a few cards, go over how to play, really just review it. So to start off, we've got right here, we've got the big box it comes in. In this box, you'll get 6 big stacks of cards. And then we've also got an expansion, which I'll touch on in a later video. And here goes the big rule book, big color rule book, nice rule book. Grab that out, show you some pages. Nice rule book, right? And then from the top, I guess the first thing we'll do is we'll kind of go over the overview. So to set up the game, you're gonna get yourself 20 health, you know, good old magic dice, good for that. And you can only reach 30 health max and then you cap out on health. Okay, so to set up the game, you'll start the game by grabbing in the competitive mode. Now there's also co-op mode, which uses these horizontal cards. These so in the co-op mode, this will be the boss decks characters in their setup. But I'm not gonna really cover that today. You can also hit the review. He goes into great detail about the co-op mode, but I'm pretty much leaving that alone for today. But for the competitive mode, you're gonna pick yourself out. In the standard game, you're gonna pick yourself out 100 points of characters within these brackets. Characters are the blue cards. Their unique symbol is the purple dot on them. So unique means that you can only have one of it in a deck. So after the name of the character, you have the persona after the dash. Now, so right now we've got 90 points. We could put in 10 more points, but just 100 points max for characters to start the game off with. So I believe you can have up to 4 characters. You might even be able to have more, but just max 100 points. Okay. Now, in one location. So the locations are going to be your green cards. In the standard game, you get to pick one location and 100 points of characters to start off the game with. Start off the game when you set up. Okay. Okay, now, and let me go ahead and go over the attributes on cards. There are, so characters, we've already went over the characters. We've also got these gold border cards. These are called allies. They're very similar. They've got these stats on them. Okay, now starting off with the characters, the blue borders. The yellow stat is energy manipulation. Now, he's already iterated on this game. Udric, he's iterated on it. So in the next iteration that he's coming out with, he's gonna actually update the game to have the symbols to appear on these stats. So right now, energy manipulation, that's gonna be like a psychic symbol. I'm sure, like probably like an eye or something. And then we've got the fighting skill, which I'm sure will be represented by a fist. Then we've got strength, that might be the fist, but that again might be a bicep or something. Then we've got intellect, which that kind of goes against what I was saying with the energy manipulation, but that might actually be the brain. Yeah, the eye works and then the brain works. And then on the allies, the stats are only those are going to be attack and defense, because like, you know, the allies just assist the characters, they're not as complicated. And then of course the stamina, both types have stamina, so this is pretty much how many points it takes before it's knocked out. Okay, now going further into detail into the stats, the energy manipulation represents a character's ability to tap into paranormal, psionic, and metahuman energies that allow for a number of defensive and offensive mechanics. When successfully blocking, counterattacking, or defending with this attribute, deal X damage to opponent, where X equals the difference. Okay, so this is one cool addition to the game, one cool new addition to the game, which is combat triggers, which really sets this game apart from other two-player dueling games, or like, you know, multiplayer dueling games. But this so these combat triggers, so as we see these first stats, we're just gonna kind of ignore the allies for a minute, but these characters, these first three stats are attack stats. So whenever you go to attack with the character, the blue border, you can choose one of these stats to do so with. Now when you do that, now in this blue one, this one is only, just imagine that as like a defensive stat, only for defense, only to be defended with and linked with, but we'll get to the linking in a second. But back to the combat trigger. So whenever you successfully block, counterattack, or defend with one of these attributes, then you get to do the combat trigger, which, like I said, with the energy manipulation, you will get to deal X damage to an opponent, where X is the difference. So if you get that attack off with the yellow, then the opponent, say, blocked for 1 or whatever, and 1 is the difference, then you're going to deal X damage to opponent, where X is the difference. Okay, now with the fighting skill, the combat trigger on that one is target character or ally is minus X to combat until end of turn, until end of your next turn, where X equals the difference when successfully blocking, counterattacking, or defending with this attribute. So like, even if you defend, like, you know, you do a counterattack. I'll get into the combat phase in a second. But then we've got the strength attribute, which is target character or ally not already affected by this combat trigger is exhausted for X turns, where X equals the difference. So this can actually, whenever you successfully block, counterattack, or defend with the green strength attribute, you can tap a character down for X amount of turns, which is crazy, which is just an mechanic that's always in the game. Okay, then we've got the blue. I've got to include the blue too, because even though this is just a defensive trait, you can also pop these all off whenever you successfully block with this attribute. So even blocking works. So then when you do that intellect combat trigger, then you get to opponent discards X cards from their hand and or the top of their draw deck, hand first, where X equals the difference. Okay, so while I'm doing all this, let me just go ahead and skip forward to the combat phase to kind of make sense of what I'm talking about. Okay, so in the combat phase, first of all, this is the meat and potatoes of the game, the combat phase. But so first we've got the assignment step. First you're going to choose who you're attacking with. Let's just say for instance, abductor. Yeah, I've really honestly, to illustrate this, I've got to pull out more characters. Let me pause this and get right back to it. All right, I'm back. I pulled a few more entities. I wish he would call characters and entities together, characters and allies together, like something as a name, but I pulled some more guys out. I'll set those to the side. I decided actually it's kind of better to just go through the type of cards and everything first, then you get to the combat phase. All right, so we've got locations are the next thing on the agenda. So the locations, you start out the game with one location. So let's read this one. Your Hippo, Monica, and Enforcers are combat +1. Also, once per turn, any player may discard one card from hand to search for one Enforcer. That damn station of his side of his is cloaked. Cool art right there. Nice art. Digging that. All right, so as you can see, these locations can be a double-edged sword, because once per turn, any player, including your opponent, may discard one card from hand to search for one Enforcer. All right, before I go any further though, let me draw some attention to these beautiful player aids. This is also a new addition that is greatly appreciated. So starting off with the player turn phases. You discard and draw. Discard any number of cards and redraw up to current hand size. With your hand size, we'll get to that in a second. Main phase, play up to one event, equipment, ally, and or character. Sacrifice any number of characters you control. Swap any of your personas, which we'll get to that in a minute. Transfer any equipment. Relocate. Initiate any number of battles done last. That's the last thing you're going to do on your turn. No main phase 2. Clean up. Discard knocked out cards. Discard excess allies. I need to get to them about that. Excess allies. Ready all exhausted cards. Check for victory conditions. Pass initiative. Draw one card to end turn. Okay. And then we've got the boss mode, competitive mode, co-op mode, which I'm not really getting into today. Then we've got the combat step, the damage step. We'll go into that when I kind of get into the combat some more. All right, so next in line, we've got two kind of red border cards. These are basically in Magic, these are your sorceries and instants. But okay, so events. Those are your sorcery speed. You do it on your turn, pretty much. Yeah, once per turn, and they remain on the table often. They often remain on the table. So these are actually more like enchantments. But and then often they'll have a requisite box, this green box. So this means this requires you to have fighting skill of 8 on the table. And again, that green stat is fighting skill, which will be way easier to tell offhand when you see the symbols that are added soon. Fighting skill green. So right now, if Abductor Gene Splicer was the only character on the field or entity with a fighting skill, so 6 would not be. So like, say that this were the only character on the field for this side, then this card, if this were on this side of the field, it would actually be discarded, because you need 8 fighting skill to maintain this card. And what does it do? Whenever damage is dealt during an attack or counterattack, you may discard one card to add 2 damage. Discard event after you've exhausted your draw pile. Limit 1. Okay. And then that's an event, which is a field spell, aka enchantment in Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh or something. Transformation interrupts. That is your instance. So you may cycle one persona you control to search for a matching card, or give target card +2 to any attribute until end of turn. So like, you know, you'll resolve this. I'm sure like if somebody interrupts your interrupts, they could counter it. But you know, once this is resolved, it just gets discarded and goes away. All right, that's the red border cards. Then we've got the gray, which are equipment. One played max per turn, played onto a character, not allies. So allies cannot hold equipment, just the characters. For example, one is may be equipped to ally, equipped character, or ally is combat +1 and stamina +1. Right. that's the types of cards so far. Then we've got the gameplay. We'll pull this out again too. So, gameplay. Clockwise order. Start with player who has initiative. Random at the game beginning, you know, roll a dice or whatever. Paper, rock, scissors. Phases. Discard and draw. Mulligan every turn. So you get a mulligan every turn. Discard any number of cards and redraw up to current hand size. Okay. Current hand size, I believe we'll get to the current hand size in a second. Okay, then the main phase. Transfer cards can move equipment an infinite number of times in a turn between characters, not allies, of course. Sacrifice. Beginning of main step can discard point total of cards. So you can sacrifice the point total of cards because you can only have 100 points max. So if you draw into another character or so or something, then you can sacrifice one and then put another one out. Okay. Yeah, and then sacrifice any number of characters you control. Swap your personas. So swapping personas is, there's going to be a number of different abductors in a deck. One of them is Gene Splicer. You can only have one Gene Splicer in the deck. But then say for instance you've got another abductor followed by a dash called let's say Xenomorph. Say there was an abductor Xenomorph. Then you could sacrifice that, then you could swap that one out. In doing so, you can do that one time per turn at beginning of your main step. Then the swapped one is returned to your hand. So Gene Splicer comes back to hand, so you can do that later. And then you can put out Abductor Xenomorph. Alright. And then battle. May attack multiple times in a turn. Yeah, initiate a number of battles. Relocate, we'll get to that in a minute. That's like going off of the board into this other realm. So initiate any number of battles. So battle. May attack multiple times in a turn. Character abilities can only be involved in one combat per turn. So characters / allies can only be involved in one combat per turn. So you're not getting to reuse them or whatever, you know, you use them, tap them, and then they're out of the combat per turn. Can only attack and block with unexhausted characters / allies. Okay. And that's exhausted. Turn 90 degrees. Okay, now going into this combat step. The meat and potatoes of the game. Okay, the assignment step is where you choose a character or ally. Then the second thing, you choose a target. So right here, current player declares which card will initiate combat, which attributes will be used for the attack and defense, and the target of the combat. Exhaust chosen card. These things come in so much handy. Okay, so the first thing, you're going to choose your guy that you're going to attack with. You exhaust that guy. You decide which stat is going to be used to attack and which stat is going to be used to defend. You can only use one to attack and then a different one to defend. You can't do it with the same one. Okay, so say that I'll attack with fighting strength and then I'll defend with intellect. Okay, now the next step is to choose to pick out the opponent's target. Okay, this is why I did this. Okay, so say that I've got these guys on the table. This is on my side. Say that the opponent, they have this character and these 3 allies. I think you can only have 4 max allies out in play. All right, so I choose, I'm gonna swing with Abductor Gene Splicer. I'm gonna attack with the 6 green, and then I'll defend with the 6 blue, which is intellect in fighting strength. And then I'm gonna swing on this guy. Okay, so I'm swinging on this guy, putting my guy there. Now Allies can block for characters, but characters cannot block for allies. Okay, going on down the list, we've got, I picked out my target. So defender declares which card. Okay, yeah. Picked out my target, the stat I'm attacking with, and then the stat I'll defend with if counterattacked. So I picked out intelligence, and then if I'm counterattacked, then I'll defend with that one. Okay, then the opposing player, now the priority goes over to them. They choose a guy to defend with. So see, I've picked out Epidemius Rex to attack with. Now, the opponent, they can choose a guy to defend with. So they may wanna, instead of letting me just go ahead and attack that guy, they'll defend with Enforcer. And then they choose a guy to defend with, if any. They don't have to, but then the stat they defend with, they will defend with their defense. Okay, so defender declares which card, if any, will defend the incoming battle, and which attributes will be used for counterattack and defense, then exhaust chosen card. Addition of combatants and selection of attributes will switch back and forth until both players pass consecutively. Compare attackers' total attack versus defender's total defense. So it's not just one on one guy. It's you see where everybody attacks and defends, then you add all of that number together, and then subtract that from the other guy's number. You compare attacker's total attack versus defender's total defense. Difference is dealt in damage. Okay, compare defender's total counterattack, then you do that again with the defender's total counterattack versus the attacker's total defense. Difference is dealt in damage. So let's say that we just stopped it right here. Okay, so let's say that we just stopped that attack right here. The abductor is swinging in for 6. So the enforcer is defending with 2. So the enforcer is going to be out, but they don't die until the whole combat thing is over. So we didn't add anybody else to the fight. We could have added more guys to the fight, but okay. So the enforcer is going to hit the abductor back for 3. Okay, so we'll go like that. It's just a whole step of things. Okay, then since you can do another attack, because as we see, you can initiate any number of battles done last. So once that battle is done, I can go ahead and do another battle. So these guys are okay. So let's keep reading the rest of this. Okay, difference in damage is dealt. So this guy's knocked out. This guy has 3 damage on him for the remainder of the turn. From the enforcer, who dealt 3 damage to him. Okay, now we've got, okay, damage step. The attacker assigns damage, if any, to any number of defenders. Defender assigns damage, if any, to any number of enemy attackers. If player was attacked and wasn't defended, the player's health is reduced by value of total attack. Resolve combat triggers, if any, beginning with current player. Page 2. Yeah, and the combat triggers. Yeah, it's gonna be, so like when you're first starting the game, you're not advised to play with the combat triggers, but once you're used to the game, then you add these combat triggers, which is something that I totally neglected right there. Okay, so I swung in with that green, which is strength, which means that whenever I successfully block, counterattack, or defend with this attribute, target character or ally not already affected by this combat trigger is exhausted for X turns, where X is the difference. Okay, so target character. Now, would that be the enforcer or somebody else? I'm gonna say it's gonna be the Enforcer, because that seems pretty fair. But it could be that even though I swung on the Enforcer, I could affect one of these other guys, which just doesn't seem right. So we're just going to put Enforcer to the side. And then Enforcer, what they could do... Yep, and allies cannot do the combat trigger. Only the characters. So bear that in mind. So we'll be able to use Epidemus Rex whenever he attacks. He'll be able to do his combat triggers. Alright, but that's pretty much the combat. Okay, and important note, characters may not block an attack made on an ally. So, you know, your characters are important. You're not going to be blocking for allies. Attack may only be used to attack or counterattack. Intellect and defense may only be used to defend. Yeah, so defense only used to defend, and intellect only used to defend. Alright, so that's that. That's combat. Just take some getting used to, then you'll be like the back of your hand. Alright. If a blocker was assigned, battling player may tap another card to bring it into combat. So yeah, so the combat can get crazy. Okay, damage step, yeah, we already went over that. The cleanup phase. Okay. Yeah, cleanup phase is KO'd cards and equipment on them are discarded. Tap cards readied. Damage is cleared from stamina. So yeah, that represents the damage from the stamina. Like if this guy survived, then it'll be removed. And past initiative phase, draw one card, declare your turn over, and initiative passes to opponent. Sample deck lists are in the book at this point. Page 11 and 12. Got some sample deck lists to choose some sample decks from this vast array of customizable cards for decks. Then we got, okay, so the areas of the game. We've got the out of play area, an area like Exile in Magic, where your guys can't be attacked or targeted, but they can be linked. Linked is like a psychic thing where you use pilots to control mechs that are in the in-play area from the out-of-play area. Yep, it's wild. Then we've got timing issues where the active player has priority in cases like that. Then we've got decking out, which when you draw your last card, you take 5 damage and shuffle, and then you make a new deck. Discard X cards, unless otherwise stated, X comes from hand. Then we've got the co-op mode, play versus the boss deck, horizontal blue cards and the purple cards, purple scenario cards. You'll start the game off with these conditions. The win con is boss deck is depleted the second time. The loss con is the second depletion of a player draw deck. You can play this with multiple people, I think up to maybe 4, it might even be more. But a condition, damage dealt by any attack is reduced by 1. War of attrition. Both sides have marshaled their forces for the long game, hoping to wade out the oncoming storm and strife, the enemy's trickling resources to victory. Will you emerge victorious? It's kind of the lore of this scenario, war of attrition. Okay, and like I say, yep, and the boss's health on this one. We'll look at one of these boss cards too. This is Susan, Hero of the People. 15 points per player. So say you're playing with 6 players, then you'll 15 times 6, which will be what, 90? Yeah. All right, deck minion swarm, which is going to be on that page 11 and 12 that we just looked at, I'm sure, or elsewhere. But add cancel chambers times one of those cards, Moon Dollar, senior member 1, blase blah. Allies Susan control are attributes +1. She attacks and counterattacks with 6 fighting skill and defends with 5 energy manipulation. +2 if attacking player has 3 or more cards in hand. Her threshold is 6 in combat, +2 when counterattacking. So yeah, tons of replay value in this core box. Tons of it, multiplayer. Alright, and then let's go over the keywords. Then we'll get into that the lore background. And then I'll let y'all go so I can bring y'all back for the expansion. But alright, let's go over the keywords. Boosts means if equipment gets +1, if equipment, then it gets +1 to its effects. But if it's a character or ally, it gets +1 to all attributes. Boosts, bunch of stuff. Okay, combat trigger is, we've already went over the combat triggers, but at the end of the damage step, starting with active player, only one trigger each player whose attribute did successful attack or defense can pop off a combat trigger. Cycle is returned to the bottom of the deck. Enclosed does nothing, but cards may reference it for some game effects. Host can be possessed when host is possessed. They're piloted by a possessing card. Inhabit, only played to out of play area. Can possess a host, can use attack, defense, stamina of host is their own. Limit, how many cards in play, copy per turn. Linked, may add intellect of another linked character when using their intellect. Paradox, if more than one player controls same unique card, regardless of persona, all players discard one card from their draw deck. They mill themselves if there's a paradox on the field. Pilot, move or play pilot to out of play area. Can move them back to in play. Only way to move back and forth. Requisite, drop below, then you discard the card immediately. Search means the draw deck. If not specified, it's player's choice. Swift, character doesn't initiate a counterattack. Unique is that purple diamond. Yeah. And then let's go into the lore compendium. Check that out. And let's go to the prologue. Kind of the backstory of the game. Imagine a world far removed from Earth. Yeah, Star Wars it out. Imagine a world far removed from Earth. An artificial sphere constructed as a joint effort between two species to save a dying one. The humans and the Alpha Centauri. A millennia has passed and BetaEarth has become a faltering hotbed of unrest and corruption. Alien forces, paranormal science, and greed have given. For the average citizen, every day is a fight for survival, and there are only a lucky few who can garner safe passage from this floating metal tomb. Yet out of the darkness, heroes have arisen. Men and women with different skills and abilities, but all with the courage to stand against the forces of darkness. It is here that the battles are waged, and to the victor our world. Epitomus Rex. This cat. Alright. In the modes, like I say, BetaEarth can be played in 2 different modes, competitive and co-op. What immediately follows are the rules for the competitive mode. Alright, went over that. And then let's go to the real whole lore compendium. Yeah, lore compendium. Okay. In the beginning, the earth was dying. And despite the cry of environmentalists worldwide, the problem didn't begin with man. It was discovered that the breakdown of the planet's biospheres and geological cycles was the result of a crossfire in an alien war. A war between the Alpha Centauri and the terraforming race known as the Hive. A Hive terraforming device aimed at Alpha Centauri was knocked off course and crashed into Earth eons ago. It released its devastating nanotechnology, which penetrated the crust, drilled into the core, and began its destabilization of the planet. Not designed for the molten heat and blistering pressures of Earth, the nanotech was destroyed in the process. The result was the decimation of all life, a new ice age, and the eventual birth of the human species. What? Sounds like the Eternals. In time and with the gradual expanse of civilization, the collapse of Earth that had already begun was accelerated. Despite efforts to undo the damage, Earth reached a terminal point in its breakdown in 2117. Not too far off, about 100 years. Desperate for assistance, Earth relaunched its space program after having been mothballed for over 50 years. Probes were sent, all directed at our closest neighbor, Alpha Centauri. And as years passed, war, famine, and economic turmoil drove humanity further and further into chaos. It wasn't until 2137, 10 years after sending the first Alpha Centauri probe, that Earth got an answer. It came just as the last of the ozone had nearly depleted and humanity had all but destroyed itself in the form of a solitary starship named Beacon. It came with Alpha Centauri delegates, advanced tech, and an offer to save mankind. If humanity could settle their differences long enough, then they could offer the means to construct a whole new world, a Beta Earth, if you will. Beta, wherein humanity could start again. It would be a world free of the geological uncertainties of a traditional planet, coupled with an enlightened society comprised of both Terran and Alpha Centauri peoples. In a miraculous show of solidarity and brotherhood, mankind took up the gauntlet and began construction of their new home. With Alpha Centauri aid and direction, Beta Earth was constructed in under a decade. Just as the final transport shuttling Terrans, I smell a backstab. Just as the final transport shuffling Terran and Alpha Centauri people touched down onto the artificial planet, Earth lost the final layers of its ozone and magnetosphere, with volcanic earthquakes and eruptions that tore its crust into a molten mess spanning its entire surface. In short, Earth was no more. It became a truly barren waste, which was jettisoned out of orbit and replaced by Beta Earth, now simply known as Sol. It's locked in orbit around Jupiter. We are now living in what many of my fellow historians have dubbed as the second great age of mankind, a time that, from all appearances, is far better than we have ever lived in. Economies are stable, trust with elected officials is at an all-time high, and our technological advancement is second to none. Yet despite all of this, crime and sordid displays of debauchery, hate, and greed have crept into society once more. Only time will tell if humanity has ultimately learned the greater lessons, or if this age will end like the last one. Epitimus Rex, Chief Historian and Remote Archon of Beta Earth. Journal entry, September 18th. Stardate, September 18th, 2386. Already sounds good. Sounds darn good. Alright, yeah, I'm excited. Y'all excited? Yeah, like, it's on the Game Crafter right now. Check it out. Beta Earth. And then I'm going to flip through all of these cards shortly and get to this expansion, which has more stacks of cards. So, until then, we're going to hit y'all off with a Vulcan. Live long and prosper. And as I say, hit up that boy, The Review, on YouTube. And he has other detailed how to plays if I confuse you with anything. But yeah, live long and prosper. Holla at your boy.